Welcome to this special episode of Afternoon Light, the podcast of the Robert Menzies Institute. In today's episode, I'm joined by Priscilla Spalding, who participated in the Menzies Early Career Network. This network offers Australian university students a fantastic opportunity to engage with the history of the Menzies era, connect with like-minded peers and respected figures in the field of Australian political history. As part of their involvement in the program, our 2024 participants contributed to a very special project, writing chapters for our upcoming book, Finding Menzies, a New Generation's Inspiration for Foreign Affairs, Social Policy and Political Thought. In this episode, Priscilla and I will delve into her experience, the insights she gained, and how they've shaped the conversation around Menzies' enduring legacy in modern day Australia. So, welcome, Priscilla. Great to have you on Afternoon Light.
Thanks for having me. It's really exciting. And I've
Oh, it's great.
enjoyed the Early Career Network. It's been one of the best experiences of my life so far.
Oh, well, that's very, very good feedback to have, Priscilla. And you're studying law and business at UTS in Sydney. So you're a uni student, and we're very grateful that you've taken a bit of extra time out of your busy study schedule to participate in this network. And you've written a paper or a chapter on the political philosophy of aspiration and the Australian dream, which is fascinating. What attracted you to this topic, Priscilla?
So when I think of Menzies leadership, I think about someone who is inspiring. And that's one of the reasons he was such a long-standing prime minister and why he is still a source of inspiration for the MPs of the Liberal Party today. So I thought that his legacy left behind a sense of um, you know, inspiration, of course, but also that is sourced from his ability to get people to actually aspire to things. And he actually did that through his policy. And I think he just embodied what it means to be aspirational as a person. And I also decided I wanted to get into this topic because personally, I think, you know, encouraging people to be aspirational is one of the best things a political leader could possibly do when they're serving, especially as a prime minister. And I think, the Liberal Party values are strongly aligned with getting people to be aspirational and, be rewarded for their hard work. And I think Menzies definitely, as the founder, he really instilled that in policy. And I think he did that through education, housing, and just in the way that he presented himself and the way that he spoke in his speeches, such as in the Forgotten People podcast. It was one of the most memorable speeches for a reason. And I think it's because he was like, you know what, there's been some hard times. Society is facing, one of the worst possible things that can happen to you, but we can't forget about anyone, especially the people who are known more as like the quiet Australians. So I thought, looking into how aspiration is kind of a political philosophy and how Menzies applied it in his leadership was a really interesting topic because I also think it's just timeless and it really truly helps us understand more about his character and what he hoped to achieve for Australians.
I think it is a fascinating, I guess, philosophical approach to really cherish aspiration and design policies that nurture people's aspiration, but enable them to reach for their best possible self and work hard for their personal development and growth. Menzies himself has a pretty incredible story from very humble beginnings. How do you think his own personal experiences shaped his worldview and his views on aspiration, Priscilla?
So I think he himself was an individual who, he aspired to do wonderful things in his life from a very young age. What his biography and autobiographies like tell us is that, he really valued his educational experiences and he started off, in a small town in Victoria and his parents had a small business. And, I was watching this documentary. I think the Menzies Research Centre actually um, did it, the one that I viewed, and it was talking all about, how Menzies' parents also got him to participate in the community from a very young age. And I think, he aspired to be a leader because of that as a child, having such a great influence from his parents. And then when he was in school, he was, he was a stellar student. He had many achievements. He also went to Melbourne University after graduating high school on a scholarship because he worked very hard to get there. And I think one of the books I read said something like if he hadn't achieved that scholarship, he actually wouldn't have had the opportunity to attend Melbourne University. So I think, he always aspired to do what was best. And I think that sense of aspiration he had within himself, he kind of projected through his policies, and he wanted other people to aspire to do better. And he also went on beyond university, but like to become a barrister. He eventually did get into the United Australia Party, and he served and he did some really remarkable things. He also, you know, had a key role in high court decisions at one point in his career. So everything he did, it seems like he always aimed to achieve as much as he possibly could, which to me is the definition of aspiration. And he obviously committed himself to this, I guess, philosophy. Like we should always aspire. So it's him as a person that is reflected through his later policy decisions and the way he wanted to encourage Australians to overcome hardship.
It's interesting. He sort of is in praise of success through his and a lot of what he talks about in the Forgotten People speeches is around supporting social mobility, that everyday Australians should be able to educate their kids, work hard, buy a home, be leaders and be engaged in democracy and society and community and take care of each other. The tall poppy syndrome, that sort of phenomenon of cutting down the people who have reached a pinnacle of their career or have reached a sort of an element of success, and that they should sort of be somewhat denigrated, and the kind of the battler, maybe the person
Yes.
who's not doing so well, should be lifted up and praised. I mean, it's so different from what Robert Menzies was talking about, but that is a pervasive Australian attitude, isn't it?
I definitely agree. And it's actually really sad because, post World War II, everyone was trying to do the absolute best for themselves. Like, I know these days, like, especially around the topic of housing, young people kind of bring up the topic of, how they feel like they're working to achieve absolutely nothing because they don't think they'll own a home. And then they talk about how many boomers actually own a home. And I think it's kind of sad because the boomers, like, well, quote boomers, actually
It's okay. You're allowed to say boomer.
were, living, a lot of them were living in the Menzies era, and they were able to own a home, and they also worked hard to do so. And that's also because Menzies, he was around at the time and he was enabling people to own a home and encouraging it. And now I feel like, because Menzies also referred to the home as the spiritual, and it was like the heart of the family's, livelihood essentially. And now that we're lacking that, I'm kind of like, is that why we have tall poppy syndrome? Like we actually think things aren't attainable at the moment. Is that why it's peaking? Or have we just kind of lost, in our leaders that conviction that Menzies had in that vision for everyone to do better for themselves? Because I think, Australia should be applauded for our mateship and our laid back attitude, I guess, because it means that, people aren't really degraded for not, having enough social mobility. But it's also kind of like, when do we also acknowledge it's great to have aspiration, and it's amazing if you can overcome hard times? Like the housing crisis is a very hard time for young people. And then in the Menzies era, it was World War II. So it's kind of like we still all need to have that aspiration, that hope to overcome whatever challenges are there in the modern day, which is why it's such an important political philosophy to me, because it'll always apply no matter what challenges we face in modern society.
Yeah, well, aspiration feeds progress, doesn't it?
Yeah,
One of the things that you write about in your chapter, and that, of course, was an absolute passion for Menzies, was education and the transformative nature of education on people's lives. How were his policies and investments in university education reflective of the politics of aspiration that you write about, Priscilla?
I think it strongly reflects aspiration because an education is just a stepping stone to so many opportunities in life. So In our current context, like, we can go to TAFE or university, there's so many options, but I think it's also it's also linked back to the aspiration of the self, because Menzies was talking about how, individual aspiration, like individualism, is important, and that's why people should really value the opportunity to actually get an education, because it was something he sought so much in his own life, and he saw how much he benefited from it. So I think he wanted other people to have that opportunity. But I think for Menzies, it was also about, I remember reading about how he also viewed it as a way for society itself to become more aspirational. And also, it was part of his aspiration to see society become better, because he was talking about if people are more educated, they're able to get better jobs, they're able to, pursue whatever they want in life, open a business, learn so many things. It's actually an enablement for a better economy. So it's, it starts with individual aspiration, like getting the degree, finishing high school, and then what you do with that sense of aspiration and attaining your education, finishing off, and then how you go out into the community. That is just continued aspiration again, because you're like, what am I going to do with my teaching degree, my accounting degree? How am I going to make an impact? So I think he just wanted to create a cycle of community aspiration, as much as foster the sense of individualism in actually attaining that education.
That sort of idea that if you sustain prosperity and through economic growth and jobs and affordable housing, high levels of disposable income, low levels of inflation, all those sort of aspects of that golden era of economic growth through the 50s, that the Menzies government oversaw. How important was that to sustaining this sort of idea of aspiration through the Menzies era?
I think it was like vital, because there was so many societal changes that were also happening when Menzies was in government, because he was quite progressive on, for example, the role of women. So in that golden era, we also saw so many women entering the workforce, which is great for the economy when, things are not great post World War II, and, households are probably like, how am I ever going to have a child and support it? It's like, if women were able to get a job, they felt empowered to, do better for themselves and their families. And I also think, like, it was also about rebuilding Australia's future, the golden era. It was about, how can we all aspire to do better for future generations? Because, like, as mentioned, Menzies' views on the home as being a spiritual thing, not just like a physical thing that you attain in your lifetime. It created generational prosperity in a way. So I think aspiration kind of planted the seeds for future generations to enjoy, property ownership and what comes with that, and a sense of generational wealth, because that is how you do attain that, is through property ownership. So I think his plan all along was to see, like, society just change for the better, even if it was in the present and overcoming World War II. But it was also about, what is the future of Australia going to look like? So the vision of aspiration wasn't just, like confined to the golden era. I think it was bigger than that, because he actually saw that there was a purpose to aspiration and what it can do for the people.
In your generation, Gen Z, how does the politics of aspiration transpire? Do you see your counterparts inspired to do better and receptive to these messages, or is there a sense that Australia's best days are behind it and they're not going to be able to do as well as mum and dad or their grandparents?
I honestly think it's a mixture of both, because we're living in an age where we have so much access to networks, like, through LinkedIn. We can start a business on our mobile phones. We can start TikTok accounts. We can become influencers. Like, there's a whole other realm of aspiration for us that is beyond university now, which is really great. And, it's still important to go and get those skilled jobs through TAFE. Um, I also think entrepreneurial, like, values are on the rise, because young people see online, oh, if I like start a business, I can actually, make more money, or I can do what I've always dreamed of. I really like makeup. I'm going to sell makeup to the world. And that's how they contribute to society and create more jobs. So I think that's such a great thing about, the internet and social media. But then it has the downside of everyone sees everyone doing good all the time. So then they feel they're not doing good enough. And then aspiration might decline because of that, because they feel like, oh, I need to be doing this or else I'm not doing enough. And, that can then lead to other problems. But I also think young people still want to own a home. I definitely think people still want to have a family. But because there's a scarcity, for example, I'm from New South Wales. If you want to live in Sydney, it's not really looking like an option. So I think the aspiration to have a family or have a home has declined because of that. But we are going through, hard economic times currently. I hope in the foreseeable future it does get better for Gen Z and they can aspire to do those things. So I think it's definitely like a mix of emotions. I do think we're very lucky as a generation to have so much opportunity. So I think aspiration is very much alive. I think it's just people are challenged. And as you said before, tall poppy syndrome. It might be hard to start an internet career when there's so many trolls in the comments section, or you're worried about people at home watching what you're doing. I guess that wasn't really a thing in the Menzies era. So it was more individual, I guess. But yeah, I definitely think Gen Z do have a sense of individualism. They're very educated, they have strong values, and I think we're in a very politically charged society at the moment. I think everyone's aware of what's going on in the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Priscilla, for talking about your chapter and your work on the politics of aspiration and the Australian dream. They're really, really important notions, and I think inspiring notions for leaders to talk about, to really lift people's horizons beyond just their immediate and strive for their best. So thank you for reminding us of this importance, Priscilla.
Thank you so much for your time, Georgia, and having me. It's been an honor to do this program, and I really recommend it to anyone. Like, it's the best opportunity.
Thank you so much.